Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Table Church online worship service. We're so glad that you chose to worship with us this morning. We're going to begin our time of service by engaging in worship with the Lord. This is where we're going to sing songs about God and sing songs to God, worshiping who He is. You're going to see words on the screen. We encourage you to stand up, to clap, to sing along, but really just ask the Lord what He would have for you today as we enter His courts.
We are your church. We are your sons and daughters. We've gathered here to meet shadow where I hide the ransom for my life. Oh, he is my song. You are good, you're good. Oh, 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 let the King of my heart be the wind inside my sails, the anchor in the waves. Oh, he is my song. Let the King of my heart be the fire inside my veins, the echo of my days. Oh, he is my song. Let the King of my heart be the wind inside my sails, the anchor in the waves. Oh, he is my song. Let the King of my heart be the fire inside my veins, the echo of my days. Oh, he is my song. You are good, you're good. Oh, you are good, you're good. Oh, you are good, you're good. Oh, you are good, you're good. And you're never gonna let me down. 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 You are good, you're good. Oh, you are good, you're good. Oh, you are good, you're good. Oh, you are good, you're good. You're never gonna let me down. 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 You are good, you're good. Oh, you are good, you're good. Oh, you are good, you're good. Oh, you are good, you're good. Oh. Come thou fount of every blessing, tune my heart to sing thy praise. Streams of mercy sung by flaming tongues above. Praise the mountain fixed upon it, mount of thy redeeming love. Here I raise my Ebenezer, hither by thy help I come, and I hope by thy good pleasure safely to arrive at home. Jesus sought me when a stranger, wandering from the fold of God, and he to rescue me from danger interposed his precious blood. Oh, to grace, how great a debtor daily I'm constrained to be. Let thy goodness, like a fetter, bind my wandering heart to thee. Prone to wander, Lord, I feel it. Prone to leave the God I love. Here's my heart, Lord, take and seal it for thy courts above. Prone to wander, Lord, I feel it. Prone to leave the God I love. Here's my heart, Lord, take and seal it for thy courts above.
Good morning, everyone. I hope today finds you doing well. Today we're going to continue looking at the Sermon on the Mount. We're going to begin in Matthew 6, verse 22. And as we begin, I really love this kind of teaching that Jesus gives us because it's very direct and it's to the point, right? I'm a simple person, and so I like to be told directly. I like to be just straight talked to whenever somebody has something to tell me. And that's what Jesus does in this. He's addressing this idea of perspective. Now, perspective is something that is vitally important for us today, especially as we face quarantine, as we face health issues, right? Perspective is important for us to have to keep sane. Perspective is how we see the world around us. Now, you can show a picture to two different people, and they can tell you two different things about it, right? They'll both see that picture differently, and that's what perspective is, right? It is how we see the picture that is painted around us. And obviously, you can have healthy perspectives or you can have unhealthy perspectives. It's ultimately up to you to decide what perspective you're going to carry through life. That's what Jesus is addressing here. So let's read it, and then we'll get going. He says this: the eye is the lamp of the body. So if your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light in you is darkness, how great is the darkness? He's talking about lights, and he's talking about lamps, and he's talking about darkness. But how does that have to do with perspective? I think we first have to understand a little bit more about light. I don't know about you, but I never really think about light, especially in this context that we're living in today, right? I don't think anything about it whenever I wake up in the middle of the night and I turn a light on in my house. It's dark, but I can fix that pretty easily. And it's not even limited to the buildings we're in, right? If we're stuck in the middle of nowhere in the middle of night, guess what? We have lights on our phones. Light isn't something that we really have to think about. But for people in this time of Jesus, even a few hundred years ago, light meant the difference between life or death. I'll never forget this. One time my mom brought my brother and I to these caves in Missouri. And I forgot the specific place or location of these caves, but their big claim to fame was that this was the cave that Mark Twain based Tom Sawyer in his book, right? And so that's what they pushed again and again. They pushed Tom Sawyer. And at one point in time in the tour, the tour guide stopped everyone in our group, and he said, "Nobody move." And he went to the wall, and he flipped a light switch, and we couldn't see a thing, right? It was dark. I couldn't even see my hand 6 inches in front of me. And so I was freaked out as a 10-year-old. And then what he did was he reached into his pocket, and he pulled out a lighter. And he flicked it so you could see. Now, you couldn't see anything behind you, but you could see that light. And whenever you could see that light, you could see around it. And as I began to put myself in the shoes of Tom Sawyer, I realized something. Was that if he was going to survive that cave, he needed light. He needed to be able to see. It is so important that we walk in light today, that we walk about in such a way where we can see where we're going. Picture if he didn't have any light, if he was stuck in a cave, if he was stuck a half a mile deep in a cave and he couldn't see a thing, if he didn't have light, barring the Lord pulling him out himself, he wouldn't have been able to get out of that cave because he couldn't see. Friends, so many times we're stuck in a cave today. So many times we're stuck in darkness and we need help. Let me tell you that we can get out of that, right? If we would have a light and we would use the light that the Lord has given us. But how? How do we do that? What does that look like? That's what Jesus is alluding to. That's what he speaks to in this passage. He says this, the eye is the lamp of your body. He's saying this, if you want light, you need to make sure that your eye is doing well. And he's not talking about the quality that you can see things with, right? He's not saying that if you wear glasses, you're not going to walk in light. He's saying this, that how you see will determine whether or not you walk in light or in darkness, right? How you see will determine whether or not you walk in life or in death. You see, perspective, how we see, will determine whether we walk in life or in death in our life today. I don't know about you, but I want to walk in light, right? I don't want to stumble. I don't want to be caught up on rocks. I don't want to get stuck in the middle of nowhere without a light, because I know that in utilizing the light that the Lord has given me, I can make my way out of anything. Now, I want to illustrate this point to you by looking back at the Old Testament in the book of Judges. And there's this judge named Jephthah. And basically, this guy was crazy. You should make a movie about him, right? Because he was the son of a mighty warrior. And he was also the son of a prostitute, right? And so his father, Gilead, married another woman and had sons with her. And then the other brothers kicked Jephthah out of the house. They said, "You're just the son of a prostitute. You don't need to live with us. You go do your own thing. Get out of here." And so Jephthah says, "Fine, I'll go do my own thing." And he goes and he joins with this band of robbers. And he's just an outlaw for the longest time. Now, if you fast forward a few years, Israel really gets into some trouble. And the Ammonites come to town and they're looking to invade Israel. And so the Gileadites, they go to Jephthah and they say, "Hey, you're a mighty warrior, and we could use one of those right now. We need you to lead our armies to defeat the Ammonites." And so Jephthah says, "Okay, but things aren't going to go back to how they used to be. Things are going to change, right? I'm going to be seated in a place of prominence. I'm going to be seated where I belong, and you are going to respect me." And they say, "Okay, yeah, fine. That's good. Just, get us out of this mess." And so Jephthah goes and he talks to the king of the Ammonites, and he's not going to have it. They tried to work things out peacefully, but it didn't work. And so what happens is Jephthah goes, he's getting ready to go into battle, and he tells the Lord, "Lord, if you give them into my hands, if you would allow me to win this battle today, then I will sacrifice the first thing that comes out of my house when I get home." It's a dangerous word, but Jephthah says it anyways. And what happens? The Israelites win the battle. Right? Israel is victorious. Jephthah gets to go back to his place of prominence. All should be well until he goes home and he remembers that he had made an oath to the Lord. The first thing that comes out of my house, I will sacrifice to you. And so the first thing that comes out of his house wasn't a cat, it wasn't a dog, it wasn't a cow. It was his daughter. Jephthah is greeted by his daughter, who is all too excited to see him. She runs out of the door and hugs him and embraces him, and he weeps because he made an oath to the Lord that he would sacrifice whatever or whoever came out of his house first. Here's how that has to do with perspective. If he would have grown up in such a way where he knew the Lord, What he would have recognized was that the Lord doesn't want human sacrifice. The Lord doesn't need us to bargain with him. The Lord wants our heart. And if he has our heart, man, we don't need to give him anything else. But instead, Jephthah grew up away from the Lord. He grew up in this society that practiced human sacrifice. So he didn't think a thing about saying, whatever comes out of my house, I'm going to sacrifice. He didn't think anything of it. He thought that you bartered with the gods. Perspective meant life or death for Jephthah. If he would have been walking in the truth of who the Lord was, what he would have recognized was that he had nothing that he had to give God but his heart. But instead, because he walked according to his own strength, he lost his daughter. Obviously, that's an extreme example, right, of how perspective will determine life or death. But in the same way, maybe there are things that we're walking in today that we don't properly understand. Maybe we're going through conflict, we're going through struggle, we're going through fear, trying to go through it according to our own strength. And while we may not lose loved ones, what we may lose is joy, peace, hope. We may lose all of these things as we walk according to our own strength. Friends, the Lord has more for you today. If you would just turn your heart towards him, then I can promise you that he will carry you through the battle. And even after the battle, when you go home, he will be with you, he will bless you, and he will make his peace rest upon you. I don't know about you, but that sounds pretty good to me today. As we work through epidemic, as we work through this pandemic, I could use the peace of the Lord in my life. But how do we actually do this? How do we lay claim to this peace and hope and joy? Friends, it all begins with this shift in perspective. Far too often we go based on our own perspective, based on how we think. But the Lord is saying, no, you're trying to carry too much. Instead, he wants us to shift our perspective to walking under and according to his own strength. We do that only through getting to know him better, right? As we follow the Lord, as we know more about him, as we spend time with him, our perspective and our eyes will shift. You see, as we do things like read scripture, as we do things like pray, as we do things such as just spending time in the presence of the Lord, how we see everything around us will shift from our eyes to the eyes of the Lord. And so what you'll see in the coming week is that we're going to begin putting out resources for you to be able to walk all of this out, right? How do I read the Bible? How do I pray? What does it mean to just spend time with God? We're going to begin releasing some of that stuff that you may begin to change your perspective. In the meantime, just begin asking those questions to God. What do I need to change in my own sight? How can I better follow you? How can I better follow you in such a way where my life just exudes peace, just exudes joy? As you ask the Lord those questions, he will answer you, and your perspective will shift.